Hey, everyone, and welcome to this deep dive into Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk.
Oh, yeah.
We got this really fascinating review from a listener, and we just had to, explore this movie a little more, because it's not just a war film.
It's so much more.
Right, and you think Dunkirk, you think battles, explosions.
Right.
But it goes way deeper. It's really about, the human experience and the tension, survival. And we're going to unpack why it is so powerful for viewers.
You hit the nail on the head when you said it's not just a war film.
Yeah.
What's fascinating about Dunkirk is Nolan uses something called subtractive aesthetics.
Interesting.
Basically, he deliberately leaves things out of the film to create a much stronger impact.
Okay, I need an example.
Sure. Think about a typical war movie.
Right.
You see a clear enemy, right?
Oh, yeah.
You see their faces, their motivations, their strategies.
Yeah.
But in Dunkirk, the German forces, they're largely unseen. You hear the planes, the bombs, the gunfire.
Right.
But you rarely actually see the enemy.
Oh, wow. So it's like this threat is everywhere but nowhere.
It is.
At the same time, I can see how that would create this tension.
Right.
Of just being constantly on edge.
Exactly. And it really makes you feel that, overwhelming dread and uncertainty that the soldiers must have felt. You're right there with them, trapped on that beach, not knowing where the next attack will come from.
Right.
Just terrifying.
Yeah. So even if folks haven't seen Dunkirk, they know Nolan.
For sure.
He's done Inception.
Memento.
Yeah, Memento.
Right.
But even hardcore film critics are like, Dunkirk.
Yeah.
This is something else.
It really is unique.
Yeah.
Nolan's famous for his complex narratives, playing with time and perception.
Yeah.
But in Dunkirk, he uses those techniques to create something that feels both intensely personal, but also epic in scope. Yeah. He really zeroes in on the human experience within this historical event.
Yeah, and speaking of the historical event, we should probably set the scene for those who aren't total World War II buffs.
Right.
So Dunkirk, this was this massive evacuation of Allied soldiers from the beaches of France in 1940.
Really desperate situation.
They were trapped, surrounded by German forces.
Yeah.
It was this desperate scramble for survival.
Totally,
Story of resilience against overwhelming odds. And I think that resonates with all of us on some level.
I think so too, for sure.
Yeah.
And the film captures that desperation. Well, in a way that's really different from other war films.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on those big battle sequences and military strategy, it throws you right into the chaos and the fear of being stranded on that beach, just waiting and hoping for rescue, not even knowing if you're going to make it out alive.
And the opening scene, it just grabs you by the throat and throws you into that chaos.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
You're introduced to Tommy.
Right.
Our main character. He's a young British soldier. And he's running for his life through the streets of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Dodging bullets and bombs.
Just pure visceral chaos.
It's just pure chaos.
You feel like you're right there with it, feeling the sand beneath your feet, the fear in your gut.
Yeah. And Nolan doesn't waste any time with exposition.
Not at all.
Or backstory. He just drops you.
Right into it.
Right into the heart of the action.
Yeah. And that sets the tone for the entire film.
Yeah.
You're just immediately immersed in the experience of Dunkirk.
Now, in the review that our listeners sent, they pointed out this dynamic between the British and the French soldiers at Dunkirk.
Interesting.
You've got these two groups, allies, fighting for a common cause, but they're struggling to communicate because of the language barrier.
Well, that's a really important element of the film.
Yeah.
It highlights the universality of the human experience in the face of adversity, even though they can't understand each other's words.
Right.
The British and French soldiers, they find ways to help each other. There's a real sense of camaraderie and shared humanity that shines through.
Despite the language barrier and the chaos.
For sure.
So it seems like this shared experience of being trapped and fighting for survival just transcends language and nationality.
It does. It really does.
And the relationship between Tommy, our British protagonist, and a French soldier named Gibson really embodies this.
Yeah.
They don't speak the same language, but they come to rely on each other for survival, their shared struggle, their dependence on each other, becomes this really powerful, unspoken element
Definitely.
of the film's emotional core. Yeah. It speaks volumes about the bonds that can form
for sure
between people in the most extreme circumstances.
Yes.
It's interesting, too, how Nolan plays with this idea of anonymity.
Oh, yeah. This is good.
In the film, further emphasizing this universality of experience, most of the soldiers, like Tommy and Gibson, are nameless.
Right.
They're just faces in the crowd. Oh. They're every soldier fighting for their lives.
And that makes you, the viewer, feel the immensity of the situation. These aren't just individuals. They represent the thousands of soldiers trapped on that beach.
Right.
All facing the same fears. Yeah. And that desperate hope for rescue.
So it's a powerful way to make the audience feel the scale of the evacuation, the sheer number of lives at stake.
Precisely. And it contrasts sharply with the way Nolan portrays the rescuers. For example, Mr. Dawson, the civilian who set sail in his small boat, the Moonstone, to help evacuate the soldiers. He's named, so are many of the military personnel involved in the rescue effort. Yeah. Did that difference in portrayal stand out to you as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It really made me think.
Right.
Why do you think he made that deliberate choice?
I think it's a brilliant way to highlight the different perspectives at play within the evacuation. These soldiers, they're caught in this overwhelming tide of war. Yeah. Their individual identities almost lost. Right. In the sheer scale of the events unfolding around them.
But the rescuers are acting with a purpose.
Absolutely.
They're making a conscious decision to put themselves in harm's way.
Yes.
To help others. That's really interesting.
Right.
It adds a whole other layer to the film's exploration of heroism
for sure
and sacrifice.
And it also raises questions about the nature of choice and agency.
Oh, wow.
In a situation like this, the soldiers, they're fighting for survival, but their options are incredibly limited. The rescuers, on the other hand, are choosing to enter this chaotic and dangerous environment. Yeah. They're actively taking a stand against the overwhelming odds.
So it's a reminder that even in the midst of this chaos, there's still room for individual acts of courage and compassion.
Exactly.
And it leads us to another powerful scene in the film.
Yeah.
The one with Alex, where he tries to sacrifice Gibson.
Oh, yeah.
To improve his own chances of survival.
I remember that scene.
That was intense.
That scene got under my skin. Yeah. It's a perfect example of the zero-sum mentality that can take over in extreme situations. Right. Where survival seems to depend on someone else's loss.
Right.
It really makes you question what happens to our moral compass when we're pushed to the absolute limits of endurance.
It's easy to judge Alex from a safe distance.
Right.
But when you're facing a life or death scenario, the lines between right and wrong can get incredibly blurry. Yeah. I don't know what I would do.
I don't either.
In that situation.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I find so compelling about Dunkirk. Nolan doesn't shy away from the difficult questions. Yeah. He presents these ethically complex situations. Yeah. But he doesn't offer any easy answers. He leaves it to the viewer to grapple with those moral dilemmas and the uncomfortable truths of war. It's not about judging these characters, but about understanding the complexities of their choices.
So he does it all without being preachy.
No.
We're taking sides.
Not at all.
He just lets the story unfold, and it's up to us to decide what we think.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of Nolan's masterful storytelling, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how he uses actual cinematic techniques to immerse us in the action.
Right.
Have you ever heard of Z-axis bombing?
I have.
It sounds like something out of a technical manual.
It does.
But it's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So explain it to me.
Okay, so it all comes down to how Nolan films those bombing scenes. So imagine you're watching a baseball game. Yeah. And the pitcher throws a fastball directly at the camera. Okay. That's essentially the effect Nolan achieves. Wow. With Z-axis bombing. Yeah. Instead of showing explosions from the side, he films them along the Z-axis, which means the bombs feel like they're coming straight at the audience.
At you. I can see how that would be incredibly intense.
Incredibly. It creates this really visceral, immersive experience. Yeah. You're not just passively watching the bombing. You're practically feeling the force of it.
Yeah.
It puts you right in the soldier's boots,
right?
Making you experience the terror in the chaos firsthand.
Oh, that's brilliant. I can't wait to see that on the big screen.
You absolutely should.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you have to experience to truly appreciate.
And then there's the way Nolan plays with time.
Oh, yeah.
In this movie, it's not your typical linear storytelling.
No, not at all.
He's got 3 different timelines happening at once.
Right.
Events on land, events at sea, and events in the air.
Yeah, he's woven together these different threads to create this incredibly rich tapestry.
It's almost like a puzzle. With these different pieces fitting together to create the whole picture.
Right, and it's not just a random jumble of scenes.
Right.
The way he cuts between these timelines really intensifies the feelings of urgency, isolation, and the chaotic nature of war.
Yeah.
It's like you're constantly jumping between different perspectives, different moments of crisis, and it creates this incredible sense of mounting tension and suspense.
And that sense of being overwhelmed is so central to the Dunkirk experience.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this masterful manipulation of time. It also plays into how Nolan blurs the lines between Dunkirk being a war film and a disaster movie.
Interesting.
It's interesting because in some ways Dunkirk feels more like a disaster movie than a traditional war film.
Now that you mention it, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's not just about the fighting, it's about the sheer scale of this event.
Right.
The overwhelming forces at play. Like it being caught in a hurricane or a tsunami.
Exactly. The German attacks.
Yeah.
They're almost presented like an impersonal force of nature.
Okay.
Like this unstoppable wave crashing down on the shore.
Right.
There's this overwhelming sense of impending doom.
Right.
And the focus shifts entirely to survival.
Yeah.
Not on defeating the enemy in the traditional sense.
So it's less about strategy and more about that primal instinct.
It is.
To survive, to escape this overwhelming threat.
Exactly.
And I can see how that ties back to what we were talking about earlier. How most of the soldiers are nameless. Right. It's not about individual heroism or glory.
Yeah.
It's about this collective struggle for survival.
Absolutely.
The sheer value of human life itself.
And that emphasis on the intrinsic value of human life is such a powerful message, especially within a genre that so often glorifies war and individual acts of heroism.
Yeah, I'm really seeing how Dunkirk just flips the script.
It does.
On the typical war movie tropes. It's less about the spectacle of battle and more about this quiet heroism of everyday people facing extraordinary circumstances.
Exactly. And it really makes you realize that sometimes just making it out alive is a victory in itself.
Powerful message. It really speaks to the heart of the human experience.
It does.
So should we take a little break here and come back to this deep dive in a few?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
I'm eager to hear your thoughts as we continue to unpack the layers of Dunkirk.
You too.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back in a few. Welcome back to our deep dive into Dunkirk. Before the break, we were talking about how the film almost feels more like a disaster movie than a traditional war film.
Right.
It's all about the sheer terror of being trapped, facing overwhelming odds, and just that raw instinct of trying to stay alive.
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that makes Dunkirk so unique.
Okay.
It shifts the focus away from the enemy, away from the fighting itself.
Right.
And puts the spotlight directly on that human struggle for survival.
It's almost like the characters are fighting against the situation itself.
Yes.
Rather than the specific enemy.
Exactly.
You've got those soldiers stranded on the beach under constant bombardment.
Right.
The sea is their only escape route, and every single moment feels incredibly precarious.
Precisely. And by making the threat feel so omnipresent and relentless, Nolan creates this incredible sense of suspense and tension that just keeps building throughout the film.
Yeah.
It's almost like being caught in a natural disaster where survival comes down to luck, timing, and making split-second decisions.
And speaking of luck, earlier we were discussing how Tommy's survival isn't due to any particular skill or heroism on his part.
I remember.
But more a series of fortunate coincidences.
It's true.
It's a really thought-provoking way to challenge that traditional narrative of the war hero that we often see in films.
It really does make you question those traditional narratives, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It highlights the randomness, the sheer chance that plays such a huge role in war.
Right.
It's not always about being the bravest or the most skilled.
Yeah.
Sometimes it really does come down to simply being in the right place.
Okay.
At the right time, or having a bit of luck on your side.
It really makes you think about all those untold stories.
Yes.
The countless individuals who didn't make it out. Not because they weren't brave or capable, but simply because fate dealt them a different hand.
It adds a layer of tragedy.
It does, yeah.
To the whole event.
And that's one of the things Dunkirk does so effectively.
It is.
It doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of war. It acknowledges that chance and the arbitrary nature of survival are really central to the experience. That sometimes even our best efforts just aren't enough.
That's a hard truth.
Yeah. But even amidst all that chaos and uncertainty, the film also manages to showcase these incredible acts of courage and selflessness.
Absolutely.
And that brings us back to George, the young man who sacrifices his life trying to save others.
What a powerful moment.
It is. It is.
George's story is such a powerful counterpoint to the theme of random survival that we've been discussing.
Okay.
It's a stark reminder that even in the most desperate of situations, when your own survival is on the line, people are still capable of these extraordinary acts of heroism. Choosing to put the lives of others
before their own.
It's definitely one of the most gut-wrenching moments in the film.
It is.
But it also speaks to the indomitable spirit of humanity.
Yes.
Our capacity for compassion and self-sacrifice, even in the face of unimaginable adversity.
You said it perfectly.
I remember reading in the review that our listeners sent, in that this scene really stayed with them.
As it should. It's a scene that stays with you for sure.
Yeah.
It underscores that central theme of Dunkirk.
Okay.
Every life holds value. And every act of courage, no matter how small, can have this ripple effect that extends far beyond the individual.
It makes you realize that heroism doesn't always have to be about grand gestures.
I agree.
Or leading the charge. It can be found in the everyday choices.
Absolutely.
That people make in those moments of bravery and compassion.
Right.
That shine through in the darkest of times.
It's such a powerful message.
It is.
And that's what makes Dunkirk such a profoundly moving film.
Yeah.
It transcends the genre of a typical war epic.
Okay.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah.
The power of collective action. And the enduring hope that even when facing overwhelming odds, we can find the strength to survive. And maybe even to inspire others.
And that idea of inspiration leads us right back to that incredibly powerful final scene where Tommy, back home in England, is reading Churchill's famous speech.
I love that scene.
About the Dunkirk spirit.
So powerful.
That juxtaposition of Tommy's quiet, personal moment of reflection against the backdrop of those harrowing images. Of the evacuation.
It gives me chills just thinking about it.
It's just masterfully done.
Nolan is a master of visual storytelling. That scene is a perfect example. It so brilliantly connects the individual experience to the larger historical narrative. It really drives home how the actions of seemingly ordinary people,
their courage and resilience in the face of the unimaginable, can have a profound impact on the course of history.
It reminds us that even in what appears to be defeat, even in retreat, there's this incredible spirit of defiance. A determination to persevere that can ultimately lead to a different kind of victory.
It's a victory of the human spirit.
A victory of the human spirit.
Exactly. That's the essence of the Dunkirk spirit. It's not about winning or losing in the traditional sense. It's about never giving up, about finding the strength within yourself and within each other to carry on, even when the odds seem insurmountable.
It's a message that resonates so deeply.
It does.
Not just in the context of war, but in any situation where we're faced with adversity. Where hope feels like it's slipping away. And the path forward is shrouded in uncertainty.
Absolutely. And I think the reason that message is so powerful in Dunkirk is because it's conveyed through the experiences of these ordinary people, these soldiers just trying to survive. We see their fear, their moments of desperation and doubt, but we also witness their courage, their compassion for one another, and that unwavering determination to make it out alive.
That's what makes it so relatable.
Yes.
So it's not about superheroes or larger-than-life figures. It's about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances.
Precisely.
And that makes their stories even more powerful.
It really does. It's a film that stays with you long after you've seen it.
Yeah.
And it prompts us to reflect on the nature of courage.
Okay.
The meaning of sacrifice, and the power of the human spirit to endure even the most difficult challenges.
We've talked a lot about the emotional impact of Dunkirk.
We have.
And how Nolan achieves that through his storytelling and cinematography. But I think it's also important to acknowledge the technical brilliance of the film as well.
Absolutely.
His use of things like cinematography, editing, sound design.
It's
just masterful.
It really is the way he weaves together those 3 different timelines.
Yeah.
The use of long takes and close-ups to build tension and draw you into those intimate moments. The incredibly immersive sound design that puts you right there on that beach in the middle of the action.
And I almost forgot to mention the score.
Oh.
The score.
It's so haunting and powerful.
Yes.
It really underscores the emotional weight.
It does.
Of every scene.
You're so right. The score is brilliant.
It is.
It's a perfect example of how all the elements of filmmaking, when used with such precision and intention, can work together to create a truly immersive and unforgettable cinematic experience.
Yeah.
Nolan's attention to detail.
Right.
His commitment to realism and his willingness to experiment with form and structure all contribute to the overall power of the film.
It's clear that this is filmmaking at its absolute finest. It is.
It's no wonder Dunkirk has received so much critical acclaim.
Right.
It pushes the boundaries of cinema and leaves a lasting impression on everyone who watches it.
I couldn't agree more. It's a film that truly deserves to be seen on the big screen.
Right.
That's where you can fully appreciate the scope and scale of the evacuation, the immersive sound design, and the sheer beauty of the cinematography.
Yeah.
It's an experience that transcends the typical war movie genre.
It's a film about humanity. It's about resilience.
Yes.
And it's about the power of hope that somehow manages to endure even in the face of overwhelming adversity.
And it's a film that stays with you long after those credits roll.
Right.
It prompts reflection on the nature of courage, what it means to sacrifice, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
In our deep dive into Dunkirk. But there's still so much more to explore.
There is.
What do you say we take another quick break and come back for our final thoughts?
Sounds good.
On this incredible film.
I loved it. I can't wait to hear what resonates with you most after spending this time immersed in the world of Dunkirk.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Dunkirk. And it's been fascinating to really unpack how Nolan uses that subtractive aesthetic to create such a lasting impact. You know, by stripping away some of those elements.
It's true.
You typically expect from a war film.
Right.
It's like he actually intensifies the whole experience.
It is. It's a really clever approach. It's like he's challenging the audience to look beyond the surface, to understand that you don't need to see the enemy up close, to feel the weight of that threat.
Yeah.
And that you don't need detailed backstories.
Right.
To connect with the inherent value of every human life.
It's like he trusts the audience to fill in the blanks.
Right.
To engage with the story on a deeper, more emotional level. And by focusing so intently on survival, on the sheer scale of the evacuation, he creates this incredible sense of urgency and suspense.
For sure.
That really pulls you in.
Yeah.
You feel like you're right there on that beach with those soldiers, feeling that sand between your toes.
Yes.
Hearing those bombs exploding overhead.
It's a truly immersive experience. And that's where Nolan's mastery of those technical aspects of filmmaking really shines.
Yeah.
The way he uses cinematography, editing, and sound design is nothing short of brilliant. It's like he's giving a masterclass in creating a truly cinematic experience.
It is.
That stays with you.
You know that Z-axis bombing technique we talked about?
Oh, yeah.
It's such a simple concept.
It is.
When you break it down. But it's so incredibly effective.
Right.
In putting you right in the middle of the action.
Absolutely. It's one of those techniques that you might not consciously notice while you're watching the film. But it has this profound impact on your subconscious, making that threat feel so real, so immediate, so visceral.
It's like he's using every tool.
He is.
In the filmmaking toolbox to bring the audience as close as possible to the reality of that historical event.
Precisely. And then you layer on top of that how Nolan plays with time
right.
in this film. Those 3 intertwining timelines, each one unfolding at a different pace, it creates this incredible sense of tension and momentum that just keeps building and building.
Like a giant, complex puzzle.
It is.
That gradually comes together as you watch the film.
And it's important to note that it's not just a gimmick. Yep. This manipulation of time is very intentional. It serves a purpose. Right. It highlights the different perspectives of the evacuation and the different ways that the soldiers, sailors, and pilots experience time and urgency. Yeah. It's like each timeline has its own rhythm, its own heartbeat.
It makes you think about how time itself can feel so different, depending on your circumstances, on the pressures you're facing.
And it all builds toward that final scene with Tommy.
Yes.
Reading Churchill's speech.
Right.
Which is so quiet and understated, yet incredibly powerful.
That's the scene that our listener was particularly struck by.
Oh, really?
They mentioned it in their review.
I can see why it's a brilliant way to bring the film full circle. Yeah. To tie together all those threads of individual experience and collective struggle. Yeah. The speech itself is all about resilience. About the spirit of never giving up even when you're facing overwhelming odds. And by having Tommy read it, Nolan creates this incredibly powerful connection between the personal experience of the soldier and the larger narrative of history.
It's like those words delivered in that quiet moment transcend the specific context of the Dunkirk evacuation and speak to something much deeper about the human spirit.
They do. It's a reminder that even in what seems like defeat, even in retreat, there can be a kind of victory found in that spirit of endurance, in that collective effort to survive and to carry on.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dunkirk, what would you say is the main takeaway for our listeners?
Yeah.
What makes this film worth watching, even for those
That's a great question.
who might not be diehard war movie fans?
I think Dunkirk offers a truly unique perspective on war.
Okay.
It's not about glorifying violence.
Right.
And it's not about celebrating individual heroes. It's about the rawness of the human experience.
Yeah.
The emotional toll that conflict takes on everyone involved. The struggle for survival against those overwhelming odds.
Okay.
It's a film that will make you think, it'll make you feel.
Yeah.
And it'll stay with you long after you've seen it.
I think you summed it up beautifully.
Oh, good.
It's a film that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can find a way to endure. And even in retreat, there can be a kind of victory in the simple act of carrying on.
I think anyone who appreciates brilliant filmmaking and powerful storytelling should absolutely check out Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to dive even deeper into the historical context of the evacuation, I would highly recommend checking out the film Darkest Hour.
Oh, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
It offers another perspective on this.
It does.
A pivotal moment in history focusing on the political machinations.
Right.
And those incredibly difficult decisions that were being made behind the scenes while the evacuation was taking place.
It's a great companion piece to Dunkirk, for sure.
Yeah.
It really provides that wider lens on the events.
So in the end, Dunkirk is much more than just a war movie.
It is.
It's a story about humanity, about resilience, and about the power of hope that can endure.
Yeah.
Even in the face of extraordinary challenges.
It's a film that challenges our perspectives, makes us question our assumptions.
Right. And leaves us with a sense of awe. At the capacity of the human spirit to overcome even the most daunting obstacles.
And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
In a world where we tend to celebrate individual heroes, how do we recognize that everyday heroism of ordinary people who face extraordinary circumstances, maybe even every day?
It's a powerful question. Something for all of us to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Dunkirk. We hope you found it as thought-provoking and engaging as we did.
Absolutely.